A very good evening to you all. You're watching NewsX. I'm Megha Sharma. It's a special day on the eve of budget tomorrow, and therefore we look at the entire expanse of budget and the state of the economy right from Kautilya and the Mauryan Empire, where the statesmanship, craftsmanship of division of budget that had been initiated in the golden era of the country to now 2023, where Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, is going to be yet again coming out with the budget. We already have an economy that is running on a GDP of $3 trillion. We have the budget for 2022-2023, which is 5% of our GDP at a 40 lakh crore rupees. How long is it going to take for our economy to turn from a $3 trillion economy to a 5 trillion and then 10 and then 20 trillion and then 30 trillion? The dream for India becoming the top 3 economies of the world at $30 trillion is envisaged for 2047. But quickly taking a look at how our economy and the GDP and the budget has played out from 1952 to 2009 and now 2022-2023. Take a look at these figures. 1952 at rupees 3,307.50 to 43%. This was the 373.43 crores. That's a meager amount if you take a look at this. This is 1952. 2009, that amount has multiplied immensely to 10.21 lakh crores, to 2022, 39.45 lakh crores. There, let's also take a look at the inflation figures, because without the inflation figures, we'll not be able to decipher the actual cost of living for an individual from 1952 to 2009 and up until 2022-2023. So here's a look at the inflation. In 1952, you take a look at inflation at minus 12.8%. India was just about getting into its wheels after the independence. There was massive nationalization, communism, and therefore the inflation at a minus 12.8%. Surplus a lot, supply a lot, demand less, and thereby the cycle began. Then it came to 2009. 10.1% was the inflation rate, and finally when it comes to 2022, it's 6.8%. So that inflation rate has reduced considerably from 2009 up until 2022. I'm also going to bring to you the scenario in wake of what has to be intrinsic for the budget, for the state of the economy, for the calculation of the GDP. And I'm going to specifically focus on the Forex. And when it comes to Forex, we also take a look at specific 2 examples to give you a comparison of how India fares in terms of production, domestic consumption, and then export versus China, which has a population of almost equal to India at 1.4 billion and at 1.3 billion. Quickly taking a look at how the Forex reserves for India have played out for rice. Quickly taking a look at production of rice, India is amongst the largest consumers and producers for rice. China is amongst the largest exporters as well as consumers and producers for rice. So that's a direct comparison that we take a look at. At 105 million tons, India produces this amount of rice on an annual basis. This is the amount for 2022-2023. Taking a look at the comparison for China, which is manifold, about 100% and more, to 208.49 million tons. Let's quickly take a look at how the consumption, domestic consumption for India and China is when it comes to rice, the commodity. Quickly, can we change the slide over here to look at the consumption levels and then finally the export levels. So India consumes 99.5 million tons of its total production. China ends up consuming 155 million tons of its total production. Quickly taking a look at the next slide, where we take a look at the exports. How much does India export in million tons of the rice production that it produces versus China? Taking a look at the export, 4.5 million tons. And what China exports, in fact, China's export has reduced considerably in wake of the floods, in wake of the pandemic, various other calamities that were hit, and 2.42 million tons. Similarly, after we take a look at the Forex reserves and how rice plays an important role in increasing export and thereby increasing our forex reserves. We'll also take a look at the forex reserves when it comes to steel, a very important primary commodity that makes or breaks a country. So quickly taking a look at steel production for India, 78.090 million tons. Production for China, in contrast, is much more at 1,064.8 million tons. Quickly taking a look at the export figures for India and China. Can we quickly move to exports for India and China for steel? The next slide, yes. So 10.45 million tons, this is the export amount for India, while 68 million tons for China. So here we see quite the massive difference. So while we've been able to cut down on the entire gap between India and China when it comes to rice, it is still quite massive when it comes to steel production. Steel production had to be reduced by India in terms of the export that it was doing considerably in wake of 2020, 2021, 2022 and now 2023. Projection of steel manufacturers, steel production is likely to rise up once again. All right, having taken a look at the synopsis of budget from 1952 up until 2009, and then finally we take a look at 2022. Now this 40 lakh crore rupees, which has been the budget for the country for 2022-2023, how can that be augmented to the 3 trillion or the 5 trillion dream that India envisages? Obviously, there is a breakup that is also brought about, and therefore this breakup of collecting all these funds, collecting all these receipts, collecting all these revenues comes from GDP collections, it comes from income tax, that's direct taxes, and it also comes from dividends and divestment. And the major chunk of the major chunk of the budget, the major chunk of the revenue that the government ends up incurring is obviously from the income tax, from the direct taxes. I'm also going to give you a breakup of this 40 lakh crore rupees, which is 5% of the GDP, which is the budget that India had projected and utilized in 2022-2023. But my first question here to my panelist who joins me on the telecast right now is Professor Madhav Nalapat. It's good to have you, sir, on the telecast. And we're taking a complete breakup and a decoding of the budget on the eve of the budget day tomorrow, 1st of February. Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, is going to be providing us a full-fledged election budget. But my important question and highlight that I would like to impress upon is the 40 lakh crore budget. How is it going to increase? How much of it is it going to be? Then is it going to be a 5% increase? It is going to be a 10%, 15%? What is your inclination? What is your estimate?
Look, I'd like to say, first of all, that we in India are lucky to have an exceptionally capable Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister is fortunate in having a very capable Finance Minister. So I'm truly looking forward to a very, very good budget when Finance Minister Sitharaman presents it tomorrow. I'd like to point out that, please don't forget 2 or 3 things. One, the reality is that, unfortunately, independent India, let's not talk about colonial India anymore, that's 75 years back. Independent India, for a long time, held back private industry. The most powerful engine of growth was held back, was deprived of fuel. The track was blocked. The track was, stopped being built for a very long time. In 1980s, in the telecom sector, Rajiv Gandhi did introduce the first steps towards changing the telecom sector in a dynamic manner. Then in the 1990s, P.V. Narasimha Rao went ahead with doing the same with industry. Otherwise, industry was bound hand and foot. A lot of those restraints were removed by Narasimha Rao. In 2014, Prime Minister Modi did a very, very important, made a very, very important step, which is bringing in the digital revolution and basically trying to create a digital economy, and thereby, through the use of the digital mechanism, trying to smoothen the path towards development. Yeah. In my view, what is being attempted now is to have what we call a startup economy and a world champion economy. An economy in which you can have startups, and these startups can develop into world champions, in about 10 to 15 years' time.
Okay.
I think that is what we are looking at now.
I think 10 to 15 years of time, $5 trillion economy by 2030, $10 trillion economy by 2045. Is that, Joyita, then a feasible dream to dream?
I think we are not even talking in terms of 2030, which is another 8 years, 8 years away. I think we are talking in terms of 2025 to, I would say, 2026. They are hoping to achieve, I think, $5 trillion. And of course, one of the main components is that digital push that is coming from the digital economy. If you look at India's, Saudi Arabia's oil sector export and our services industry, I think we have already exceeded Saudi Arabia. And anyway, in terms of digital, the economy, that size that is growing exponentially. In fact, we are all said to be the world leader, if not already. So I think that is one. I think what we are also looking at in terms of manufacturing, I think that is one area that everybody is talking about. I think, but at the same time, we have started. It is not that we have not. So, for example, we are doing, say, in terms of mobile, India is right now number 2 to China in terms of mobile production. Then automobile, we are the 4th largest producer of automobiles in the world after China, US, China, Japan. I don't remember the order exactly, but the 3 countries ahead of us are China, US and Japan. So from there, even otherwise, I think we have crossed Japan in terms of the buying of automobiles. So you see, when it comes to that, I think, and then for example, defense. This is a very important area. I mean, it is not just about, I would say, it is in its nascent stage to an extent, but now from net importer, I think we are moving towards an area where we can also become exporter. So I think these are the building blocks of what we can call the, a $5 trillion economy. So I think it is going to happen much before 2030.
Okay, all right. I have Ajay Kumar, he's a senior journalist. Ajay, taking on what Joyita said, Atmanirbhar Bharat, Make in India, defense, Make in India, space sector, Make in India, tech sector, Make in India, green energy sector. The important aspects of a budget and the GDP growth, state of the economy are obviously the pillars. We have services, we have manufacturing, we have industries, agriculture, we have forex. Which is the sector that needs to be given focus, given impetus to allow for the further projections and goals for India to achieve?
Yeah, great question. See, I would like to, before coming to your question directly, one should not forget that this budget needs to be a tight rope walk for Nirmala Sitharaman as well as for the government led by PM Modi, because this is the last full budget before the general election. So I'm sure the budget needs to be financially and economically correct. That is the need of the hour. That is the need of the future. That is about $1 trillion economy we are talking about. But at the same time, the political compulsions would be looming large or would be in the backdrop of the PMs and the India government. So we need to watch how they are going to have a fine balance between a politically correct budget and an economically correct budget. Having said that, one thing which I would like to see is that what is the vision? Because all these things, what Professor Nalapat said or Joyita is saying, depends what's the vision, what's the roadmap? And then comes the execution part of it. So is the budget is just going to be an exercise, financial exercise, or is it going to be document telling about the future of the India and where is the vision? Then comes execution and finally the expectations of different sectors that will start lowering down the tax on the mobile components, lowering down the tax on the imported luxury mobile, bringing it down to 4,000 rupees maximum, to increasing the capital expenditure in the area of infrastructure, in the defense, and last but not least, continuing the path of reform, be it GST, be it cybersecurity, be it digital law, be it making Indian rupees digitally expected all over, lowering the tax limit to bring and attract talent from abroad to take India to $1 trillion economy.
Okay, all right. We've talked about the generic aspects. Now I'm going to particularly focus on steel and rice. I'm giving these examples because they are the most widely consumed commodities across the globe. They also help in building the country's economy and allow for the GDP to increase or decrease as per the production, domestic consumption, and then exports. And Professor Nalapat, the steel example that I had given, while India produces a certain amount, if I've certain million tons, I'm going to give you the figure right over here. Okay, all right. So that's in India ends up producing 78.090 million tons. It exports 10.45 million tons. When we compare this figure to China, it's quite staggering because the production itself of China is 10,664.8 million tons of steel production. Export then obviously increases to 68 million tons. How do we improve upon the key industries including steel to then surpass China's figure in being able to even think of taking it over and surpassing the economy of China and coming to number 2?
Well, Megha, I'd like to point out that the Chinese in the 1980s had a globally very favorable environment for their economic prosperity. They were flooded with technology, they were flooded with investment, and a red carpet was laid out for them. You have yourself seen, and this channel has discussed it multiple times, that quite frankly, there are some very powerful international forces that are not very happy at the way India is making progress, especially after 2014. You've seen, I don't want to enumerate some of the operations of those who tried to blacken the reputation of India or blacken the reputation of its leadership, whatever it is. But fortunately, none of them have succeeded. And that is a very welcome augury so far as tomorrow's budget is concerned. I'd only like to say that the point is very simple. The point is to ensure that the producer is, the honest producer is rewarded. The sincere producer is rewarded. That from now onwards, muscle power, money power, all that which used to be powerful in the past no longer exists.
Okay.
And what counts is ability. And that is where, and the confidence has grown under Prime Minister Modi. And you're seeing recently, in the last few days also, you have seen the government is a neutral umpire. I frankly do not believe that there will be very much of politics in the budget. There was no politics in the stock market over the last 3 days or so. Even though there were predictions of politics, there was no politics. It was neutral. And the great thing about this government, it is neutral, and all it wants is to see India get empowered, specifically startups, specifically young India.
Okay, I'm going to put out those figures in just a short while. In statistically speaking, that we start off at 7:30 p.m. So stay tuned. I'm going to put out figures when it comes to the stock market performances of India and the rest of the world. I'm going to put out figures of the India consolidated GDP growth. I'm going to put out consolidated figures for agricultural growth, industrial growth, fiscal. I'm going to put it out all fiscal deficit, how it is reduced over the years, and then that is going to give us a clearer picture of statistically how the country has performed, how the economy has performed in the last 5 years, and thereby projections that need to be put forth, and what Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, is going to come up with her budget in that red book she's going to carry tomorrow in the morning, and there's going to be a 2-hour speech wherein all the SOPs that I'm assuming are going to be announced, because this is going to be an election budget. 2024 there are going to be Lok Sabha elections. Joyita, how impactful are going to be the 2023 assembly elections that are going to take place, I think, in around 9 states over here in the country, and the 2024 Lok Sabha elections in terms of envisaging SOPs, envisaging welfare programs, welfare schemes, and allocating budget, allocating funds in a large number to assuage the citizens or the voter banks?
Megha, I think this is something what we have been witnessing throughout Prime Minister Modi's approach to the budget is that he is not a populist. Okay, it's not anything but so I do not expect this to be an election budget. You know, that is something I think most of the economists also are saying, and policymakers, and you know, government servants, retired government senior people, they are saying that it is going to be very tricky because he has to balance in terms of it being an election year, and apart from the fact the kind of reform measures. So everybody is kind of predicting that there won't be any populist gimmicks. So we are not expecting, many of us are not expecting any tinkering with tax slabs. Okay, because if you look at his
that's
record,
quite the contrary, because there has been quite the rumor bills running, or the expectations of the people that there is going to be a tax slab cut. That has been the popular demand.
I will be surprised if that happens.
Okay.
If it has not happened in all these years, in 8-9 years that he has been in power, it is not going to happen tomorrow.
Okay.
So I don't think that is happening. I don't think it is going to be an election budget, but at the same time, let us not forget that if he is going to continue with the, say for example, the programs for the poor, you know, in terms of food, grain and all, some people might accuse him to be being populist in that sense, because you see that that really works in favor of the BJP. We saw it in the UP elections when it comes to the, say, the food grain program, free food grain, that is still continuing, by the way.
Yes.
So you see, these things, I think there will be sops for the poor, but I don't think it is going to be election oriented budget.
Okay, that's interesting view coming in from Joyita. Ajay, I'm going to come to you, and particularly when it comes to the breakdown of the budget. Now we had 40 lakh crores. Is there a possibility of a rise of 5% or 10% of the budget allocation? How is the government going to then get the amount, reach to the amount? GST collections have increased manifold. There have been announcements that have been made quarter after quarter of this increased GST collection. Direct taxes, obviously the primary source of revenue for the government, and dividend divestment. And also the big question about fiscal deficit. We have been at a comfortable position of 3 to 5% year on year in having a fiscal deficit, which is a healthy indication of a healthy burgeoning economy.
Is that question for me?
Yes, Ajay.
Yeah. I think with the economy doing well, and as yourself you referred to the projections for GDP for next year, one, the moment an economy does well, the tax collections automatically go up. They become more buoyant, be it direct taxes or the GST. We have averaged last year, or hitherto say 9 months of this year, 1.49 lakh crores is the GST average income. This is at a level of recovery from the economy which was hit by, like all other economies, hit by the pandemic. Now obviously there was going to be a moderation in the rate of growth compared to when you start with a lower base. But 6.5% rate of growth next year, something which the economic survey predicts, and as well as multilateral agencies, and also I believe the exercise in the budget would be made around that figure.
Okay, fair enough.
That is on a large base should boost the GST income. Second, I would also say direct taxes. The recovery is being led now by the services sector. And the services sector, hitherto we had been concentrating, the taxman had been concentrating much more on the organized manufacturing to recover, to kind of bring them under the net. I see now a much more action being taken to widen the base through getting people who earn in the services sector, maybe even the informal sector, the taxable amount of income, and both these steps should augur well for widening the tax collection.
Okay.
It could easily the total of last year of 20 lakh crores or so could be exceeded and could be anticipated to go up by 10 to 15%.
Okay, so then I'm quickly going to get Ajay Kumar also. Ajay, before I close up this discussion, I have one more very important question to ask you about the expenditure that government has to make, and which are these key sectors. And obviously, once you build the budget, announce the budget, we have come a long way from 1952, 375 crore rupees to 40 lakh crores. Is that going to increase further? How much percentage? Do you think this is going to hit the fiscal deficit as well in 2023-2024? Are you able to hear me, Ajay? Ajay Kumar?
Yes. Oh, I was confused. There are two Ajay here. So, see, can you repeat the question?
My question being the expenditure that government has to do, which are the key areas that it needs to look at? Of course, defense is going to be primary. Space is going to be of extreme importance. There is going to be green tech that has been the mission of the Prime Minister. Besides that, is in the populism that the government and the Prime Minister is going to be looking at to target certain individuals, certain communities, certain vote banks.
See, the government
where are these funds going to flow into?
Yeah. See, I'm concerned at one thing, that government may or may not take the populism route. That's a different story and a different take. But yes, one challenge which is there before the government, which they have to consider, whether election year or not an election year, the employment generation, the skill India, the infrastructure, especially the real estate, that needs to be revived. These are the sectors in the global gloom atmosphere of mass layoff, where we, the young generation of India, and what is being promised to them.
Absolutely. That's an important point. I'll have to conclude this discussion. I thank my panelists for joining me on the telecast. On the other side, statistically speaking, we are going to bring out all the statistics, all the figures, all the graphs to bring you a total picture of how India has performed up until the last 5 years and what is going to be the roadmap come tomorrow, 2023-2024. Stay tuned.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.